Installing solar panels at your home or business is a big investment. But how do you know your system is performing as it should? In this video, we uncover how you can monitor your system's performance and detect issues before it negatively impacts your savings. So Larry, before we get into the details of it, give us a basic understanding of the components of the solar system.
So there are three main components,
Yep.
and I would say two of those components are passive. They just sit there, and one is more active. So you have your solar panel just kind of sits there and collects the sunlight.
Right.
Then you have your inverter that's active. It's actively making sure your panel's producing as much as it can, and it's actively converting DC to AC that you can use in your house. And then you have the racking that, again, just kind of sits there and holds everything together. So if something's going to go wrong, it's probably going to be the active part, which is the inverter.
Okay. So how do we go ahead, or anybody who has a solar system, how do they check the performance or the health of their system?
So one of the basic things you can do, I would say there's three things. The first thing, obviously, is your utility bill.
Yeah.
Make sure that you're not seeing wild fluctuations. Now, that's a little tricky because it's going to produce more in the summer, less in the winter, and maybe you use more in the summer or seasonally, in the winter than you do other times. So that's something to keep in mind. But that's something that you can check. Your energy bank, if you have net metering and they're crediting from one month to the next, is that increasing, decreasing? What does that look like? That's something that you can watch.
And that's on your bill as well.
That's on the bill.
Right.
Yep. Another thing, of course, is your monitoring system online. So that should be set up. You should be able to see what you're producing every month. Are you in line to hit your yearly production? That's something that you can track. And then finally, another thing that you can look at is any lights on your inverter. They should typically be solid, and that means that it's producing and it's communicating.
Now let's talk about some common issues and then how to troubleshoot those issues.
So there's kind of like three main issues that could come up if your system's not producing properly as much as you think, but everything's functioning the way it should. One is shade.
Yep.
Maybe you have a bush or a tree that grew over the last couple of years. So that's something to be aware of. Another is dust on your panels.
Sure.
Do you need to clean your panels? Are they really dirty? And then finally, there's connections and wiring. Is there something missing there? There's something that's not quite connected right.
So how would you identify or look for one of these issues?
So one thing that you can do, the first thing typically is look for any red lights on the inverter and check the monitoring portal for any issues.
Yep.
So that'll tell you, is it an inverter issue or is it one of those other three that we talked about, the shade, the panel soiling, or the connections and wiring. So that's kind of the first thing. And then after that, if it's shade, that should be a visual check. Or maybe you can see, hey, this panel used to produce this much, and now it's producing less than the other panels around it. Maybe that's a shade issue. As far as panel cleaning, that's a visual check. If it's a really high roof, obviously don't go up. Don't do anything uncomfortable. And then finally, with connections and wiring, that's going to be a professional coming out and looking at it.
But how do you know that? How do you know when you're troubleshooting your own system, when is it time to something you could do yourself, or I need to call a professional to come out and do it for me?
So a professional, obviously any wiring or connections issues is a professional.
Yeah.
Any roof issues, maybe there's a microinverter that's failed or an optimizer that's failed. Replacing any equipment, obviously. Really the only DIY things, Warren, that we would recommend is if there's a communications issue. So if your inverter is working but it's not communicating to the internet, is it your router? Is it an internet supplier? Is it something in the wiring, the communications wiring? That's something that a homeowner can troubleshoot. And then if there's an inverter issue, one of the things that we always recommend is power cycle your inverter.
Yeah.
Turn it off. The cycle is turn off the DC disconnect, turn off the AC disconnect, wait 3 minutes, turn on the AC disconnect, turn on the DC disconnect. That's how you power cycle your inverter. You can always try that, and sometimes that helps it to run again.
Shade issues, if there's obviously a shade issue that you can control, you can get rid of the shade. But for the most part, you're going to be calling out a professional, and that may even be the case for cleaning solar panels. There's a very specific way to clean them. If the rain isn't doing it, you probably need a professional to do that.
Right. Yeah. A residential rooftop, that's tilted, 412 pitch, 312 pitch or higher,
Yeah.
typically you're not going to have too much of a problem with that. And I'm just going to say it this way, Warren, we would never recommend for someone to get up on their roof and clean their panels.
Right.
Even a ground mount, if you're going to do that, make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure you're using the proper solution for that. Make sure you're doing it in the proper way. And obviously be very careful. It's just not something that we recommend people to do.
Yeah.
And in most cases, it's not going to make that much of a difference.
Right.
Think of it this way. If you're producing 10,000 kilowatt hours and your soiling is 1%, that's 100 kilowatt hours a year. That's like $15 a year.
Right.
So it's not that significant. If you pay a professional to come out, if you pay them $500 to clean your system, it's not worth it.
No.
Big commercial system might be different, might make sense.
Okay. And then finally, Larry, should you have regular maintenance and inspections on your system?
So we certainly recommend that there's a maintenance check at the years 1, 5, and 10.
Okay.
We include that with our workmanship warranty. You want to check it after year 1. That should help anything that wasn't quite installed properly, or if there was something weird, unusual about the system, that'll take care of that. And then after that, you should be fine with 5 and 10. Outside of that, again, the owner can look for solid lights on the inverter, can look at their monitoring system, and then they can call us if they have issues beyond that.
If you do have these inspections at year 1, 5, and 10, what exactly happens during these inspections?
So there's 3 main things that we're looking for there. First of all, visual inspection of the solar modules. Are there any broken or cracked for any reason?
Yeah.
Everything's looking good there. Secondly, all the wiring and connections inside the electrical panels. We check that, make sure everything's good, make sure everything's torqued properly. And then finally, the inverter should be checked just to make sure they're operational and they're working, in peak condition.
So really, there's 3 different ways to find out if your system is not functioning as it should. The first is to look at your utility bill and make sure that it is consistent with the past several months. If there's an inconsistency, you may have an issue with your solar system. The second is to look at your inverters. Make sure that there's no red flashing lights and that everything looks as if it's operating correctly. And then finally, to log on and look at your monitoring portal and make sure that your system as a whole is functioning as it should. If you're having an issue with your system, for the most part, you're going to need to contact a solar professional. It might be something minor that you could take care of yourself, such as shading, where you could eliminate the shade, or an internet connection that you could reconnect. But otherwise, you're better off contacting your solar professional for help. And then in terms of maintenance, you want to make sure that you maintain your system at years 1, 5, and 10.
Warren, that's really why we have our 10 guarantee, which is 10 years of workmanship warranty, 10 years of production, and 10 years of monitoring. And then in addition to that, we have system checkups at year 1, 5, and 10,
Right.
with the goal of making sure that your system is running optimally for 10 years. But then what about customers that either don't have our 10 guarantee, or maybe it's expiring, or other customers that have a system installed by somebody else? What would they do?
Yeah, that's a great question, Larry. And the great news is we have what we call Paradise Protect plans, where customers, either our existing customers whose warranties have expired, or for system owners who we didn't install their system, can select from a variety of different plans with different monitoring levels and service levels, where we'll monitor their system, we'll take that burden off for their shoulders, we'll monitor it, and if an issue arises, we'd go out and repair it for them. So if you want to learn more about this Paradise Protect plan or our 10 guarantee, we'll have links in the description below for both.